And now we're on to Vav Hamid Beis. Lo Amar Klu. Amar Lo L'Shivcha. So he used the language of Kiddushin for Shichur Shivcha. Hareat Muteres Chaladim Lo Amar Lo Klu. Even though it's true, by the way, that after the Shichur, she could marry a Jewish man, maybe not a Kohen, but she can marry a Jewish man. But nevertheless, that's not what Shichur Shivcha is all about. Shichur Shivcha is to be mafkia his Kinyan Mammon over the Shivcha who's Gufo Konu. However, here's a case of a suffix. Amar lo le'ishta arei atlat smech. You are for yourself. Mal. What is the meaning of that statement? Is he saying that now your Maisi Yadayim belong to you and they no longer belong to me, and therefore it's a lashon of hafkas zchus habal b'maisi yadayim? It's not a lashon of gerushin. O dilma legamri kamala. Maybe what he meant to say was that you're b'shus atzmech legamri, and that means you can marry anyone you want, and that's a lashon of gerush. Amalei Ravina Ravashi Toshma. I'm going to learn it from a Kalva Chomer. This Sanya we learned in the Brisa. Gufo shall get shichur. Harei ato ben chorin. Harei ato liatzmecha. We have a lashon of emancipating an eved of harei ato liatzmecha. Now the kinyan that an adon has in an eved Kanani is even greater than the kinyan that a Baal has in Ishta. Is hashta now ma eved Kanani. The kani le gufe. The Baal, the Adon has a kinyan gufo on the eved. Ki on Kamalei, and yet when he uses this language, which could be a little bit ambiguous, and he says Hareat la'atzmecha is legamre ka'amalei, he is being mishacher the eved completely and totally, and now the eved is a ben chorin, and he's allowed to marry Bas Yisrael. Is Isha de lo kani le gufa? The Baal doesn't own the Isha big gufa. He doesn't have a kinyan mammon in the Isha big gufa. Lo kolshkin. How much more so that Harei atli atzmech should be a valid lashon of gerushin, because if it works to break up a more profound kinyan in the case of the kinyan aguf of Eved Knani, how much more so in a lesser isha, so lesser kinyan, namely in the case of an isha, how much more so should Harei atli atzmech be a valid lashon kiddushin, lashon gerushin? And the Gemara says no. Your equation is not a valid analogy. Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi liavdo. I'm sorry, my mistake. Sorry. So that's the end of the sugya, and Hareat liatzmech now becomes elevated al pi halacha to the status of a valid lashon gerushin. Gwar now raises a new suffix, another lashon, which is unclear. Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi. Amali Avdo, he said to Zeved Kanani, Ainli Asik Becha. I don't have anything to do with you. What does he mean? What's the meaning that adheres in that statement? Ainli Asik Becha. Mi Amrina, should we say Ainli Asik Becha Legamri Kamala? He's cutting off any schus, any kinyan that he has on the Isha, on the Eved. And the Eved is now his B'shus Atzma. He's saying, you know what? You're still an Eved. You can't marry a Bas Yisrael. You're only chayav mitzvahs ki isha. But as far as malach is concerned, you know what? Go out there, get a job, and your wages belong to you. But he's not being meshacher and making him into ben chor. So the Gemara is vacillating now, Ravina to Rav Ashi, about the language Ein li esek b'cha. Amalei Rav Chanin Rav Ashi. You know what? You gentlemen are vacillating back and forth. I have an answer to your question from a brisa. And Amalei others say it was Rav Chanin Michuzai who spoke to Rav Ashi. And I guess there are two Rav Chanins. Toshma, we learned in the Brisa, Mocher Avdolove Kochavim. This is a terrible thing. He sells his Eved Knai to a guy, and the Rabbanon instituted a knas and impose the penalty on the mocher for selling his eved to a god. And Yotzel Acheres, therefore they say that we're going to be mafkia your kinyan over the eved. And the reason why the Adon deserves such a punitive knas is because of one or two reasons. Either he's mafkia the eved from mitzvahs haseish asman groma, because now his master, the Adon HaNochri, is not going to give the eved an opportunity to fulfill mitzvahs. Or, alternatively, if the guy takes the eved to Chutz La'aretz, then inadvertently or indirectly you're being mafkia the eved from the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. B'tzarach get shichur me rabo. The Brisa says that the Adon, the Jew who owned the eved, has to give the eved a get shichur, because even though the Rabbanan instituted a punitive knas and they were mafkia the schusim of the Adon monetarily from the eved, but nevertheless you need to make him into a ben Yisrael, and for that you need to get shichur. And now he's going to be allowed to marry a Jewish girl, but only after he gets to get shichur. If the Yisrael gave a shtar, which is called ono, then there's no need for a get shichur. Hechidomya ono, Rav Sheshes the Kosav law, he writes to the Eved, l'chetivrach mimenu, whenever you finish your employment by the akum, whether he dies or he sells you or you run away from him as a fugitive, ein li esek b'cha. I'm not having anything to do with you, and that's called ono zeu shechuro, and it's a language of shechur. But we see clearly that ein li esek b'cha is a valid language in shechur ev, and therefore it should be valid also in Kiddushin. Omar Abaye, Hamakadesh b'milva is one of the most famous sugyas in Kiddushin. Eina mekudeshes. If a man says to a woman, "Iskachi li b'milva shel visich," I already gave you money, and now I want to be mekadesh you with the money that I gave you as a loan. It's not a valid Kiddushin. And the reason for that, says Rashi, is because milva lo tzonitnu, and that money that he gave her originally as a halva, as a loan, belongs to her, so he's not giving her anything new. However, if he says to her, "Ba'noas milva," with the anah that you get from this loan, mikudeshes. But v'yosalashos came mishum aromas ribis. So we'll get back to aromas ribis in a second. First, let's try to understand what does it mean if he says to Areyat mikudeshli ba'noas milva mikudeshes. Hi hanos milva chidome. Ilema de askifa. If we're talking about a halva that he had extended to her originally, way before he wants to be Mekadesh. And the Omar law, and he said to her when he extended the loan, Arba b'chamish, I'm giving you 4 zuzim, you're going to pay me back 5 zuzim. What's that called? Ribis. And that's ribis ktsutza, which is ribis doraisa, that was established in very specific terms from the time of the matmos of the alva. And now he says to her, you know what? You don't have to pay me back the 5th zuz, but it's kachili bezachamishi with the 5th zuz, I'm being mekadesh. So we don't say milva lo tzon on the 5th zuz. So fact the Gemara, haribis ma'al yisahu. This is a violation of an Isur Torah of ribis. And Abaye had said that you're not allowed to do this because of Haramas Ribis, which is only D'Rabbanan. So let's get back to Haramas Ribis. We skipped it. Haramas Ribis means that it's like he's being Makabel Ribis. And he is saying to her, I want the benefit of Kiddushin because I gave you this loan. So the Gemara asks, but that's not Ribis D'Rabbanan, namely Haramas Ribis. This Ribis D'Oraisa, because he set up from the beginning, from the get-go, that he's giving up 4 and he's demanding that she pay him back 5. Fiod, and furthermore, Hainu Milva. In other words, he's not giving her something at the time of Kiddushin. He wants to Mekadesh her with that extra 5th zuz that she committed herself to pay him when she received the 4 zuzim. So if Mekadesh b'milva is Eina Mekudeshes, is Mekadesh b'anos milva is also Eina Mekudeshes. Lo tzricha Gemara answers the Arvach Le'Simna. He says, be Mekadesh to me with the Hana that instead of you paying me back in a month, pay me back in a half a year. And we know that holding on to money is worth money. So she gained X number of months of holding on to the money, and he says, I want to be Mekadesh you with that Hana that you got from the fact that I gave you an extension on the loan. And that's the end of that sugya. And now we get to the sugya of Eved Ivri. I'm sorry. We're not yet up to the Eved Ivri. That's the last line of the Omud. But before that, Matana Manas Lahas. Amar Rava, Heilich, Mana Manash Taxireli. Take this Ma and be Mekadesh to me, but on the condition that you return it to me. The Mecher Lokan. If he buys Karka, and he says, here, take this money as payment for your Karka, but on the condition that you return this money to me. I want a full 100% rebate on my money. Lokan. It's not a valid kinyan on Karka. Be Isha and Kiddushin Isha. I'm being Mekadesh for woman Almanas that she'll give me back the Kesef Kiddushin. Eina Mekudeshes. It's not valid. The Pidyon Ben, likewise, Ein B'no Padu. If he gives the Kohen 5 Sloim for Pidyon Ben on the condition that the Kohen would return the 5 Sloim, it's not valid. Ein B'no Padu. Now, the Gemara is going to change this girsa in Rava, but according to the girsa that we have now, Rava is basically holding matana manasa hachzer lo shmei matana. And therefore, it's not valid neither in Mecher, nor in Kiddushin Isha, nor in Pidyon Ben. But there's one case in which matana manasa hachzer is valid, and that's Bitruma. A man gives Truma to a Kohen on the condition that Kohen will return the Truma to him. Yotza Yedei Nesina. You know, it seems like, the Kohen is doing him a favor, and therefore he gives Truma to the Kohen who does him a favor. But on a Doraisa level, the Nesina LeKohen is a valid Nesina. Frek the Gemara, there's a stira in Eube. And therefore it's valid in Mecher. I'm sorry, and therefore it's valid in Nesinas Truma LeKohen. Zafilu Kula Nami in Mecher and Kiddushin Pidyon Ben. It should also be valid Ve'ika Savra Lo Shmei Matana. It's not a valid Matana. Is Zafilu B'Truma Nami. Why is it that at least Me'ikar Adin, the Nesina is a valid Nesina when he gives it to the Kohen and the Kohen returns it to him? The Yod, and furthermore, Harava Hudiyam, Rava himself said in a different context, Matana Manasa Achse Shmei Matana. So why shouldn't it be valid in Mecher, in Kiddushin, and in Pidyon, in Pidyon Bechor. And where do we see that Rava goes on record as maintaining that matana menas lahachse shmei matana helich esrog zeh al menashe tachzireli nitolo v'zero yotza. We need to lekachtem lachem, and it's got to have bilus of the person who takes the esrog. And now he got the esrog with the matana menas lahachzir, and if he fulfills that condition, he returns the esrog, then he was yotze. It means he has full-fledged bilus over the esrog, even though he received the esrog as a matana menas lahachzir lavlo yotza. But if he violates the Tanai and he doesn't return it, then he hasn't fulfilled his mitzvah. Daled mina. So Rava certainly holds that matana menas lahachzir shmei matana. And the Gemara answers, Elo Amar Rav Ashi, Bekulo Kani, let's change the gears of Rava. In all the cases, it's Kona. Rava said there was one exception. That's Lebar Mi Isha. In Isha, Matana Menas Lahachzir is not called a Matana. A woman is not going to be makna herself, Midaita, with money that she has to give back to the Baal. Lefisha Eina Isha Niknes Bechalipin. And just like in Chalipin, where she doesn't get anything, because they just use a symbolic act with a sudar, but she doesn't acquire ownership over the sudar, and that's not a valid Kiddushin. And that's called Isha b'pachos mishav prutalo matni nafshi, which is a sugya unto itself. It means we need a full-fledged gemiras das on the part of the Isha, which is lacking in the cases of, number one, Chalipin, where she doesn't acquire ownership over the sudar, and number two, in the case of matana al manas lahachzir, where she has to return the object that received as kesef kiddush. And this leads us to the sugya, which Emir Shem will cover blineta tomorrow. Omar Rava mekudeshes midin arif on daf Zayin Amanal. Thank you very much, and wishing you a great day.